Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to this White Women as Allies panel here at Women Tech Festival. I hope you've all been enjoying the day so far. I've been seeing all of you popping your questions in and your comments, so I'm hoping that we're going to have just as much interactivity on this session as we've seen in the rest of them. My name is Amri Imafidon and I am co-founder of CEMETS. I'm a trustee at the Institute for the Future of Work and I'm also the host of the Women Tech Charge podcast. But in addition to all of those things, I'm a Black woman in tech, which is something that we're all going to be discussing today and delving more into what it means to be someone that's slightly other, but even more so being a Black woman in tech or a woman of colour in tech versus a lot of the other folks that we might come across who might be white women in tech or others. So this session has been pulled together as part of a response by the organisers even of the festival as a response to Black Lives Matter and all of the discussions and all of the things that were thrown up by that and by the unnecessary and unfortunate death of George Floyd earlier this year. There's been a lot of light that's been shone on areas like justice, on things like free school meals, on quite a lot of different things. But we wanted to look at what does this mean for people working in tech? What does this mean for the women in tech movement? And how are those who are white women, for example, in tech, able to ensure that we're not having kind of the extra layers of that kind of systemic racism playing out through our industry, in the teams that we work within and in the way that we do business. So we've gathered a couple of panelists here today who are all women of colour in tech, and all of them are running organisations that you hopefully will have heard of, and if not, you'll definitely know all about them by the end of this session. But what we're hoping to achieve with this session today is to help people understand what does it mean to be anti-racist, but more importantly, what are the tangible things that you can do to be an ally and to ensure that all kinds of people, all kinds of women are able to participate and thrive in our technology industry. And this is something that's important for those of us currently working in technology, but even more so for wider society. We're Black women, we're in tech, but we're also in society. And so there's lots to be learnt and lots to be gained and more innovation to be had from having lots of different types of people in technology industry. So I've got a panel of 5 fantastic people who are joining me, and I'd like to introduce them one at a time. I'm going to give their name and their title, and then they've got 30 seconds to give in their opening gambit, their opening bit, their extra intro to themselves and why they're on the panel today. And I'm going to go in alphabetical order by first name. Just so you know, folks, it's the first time I'm saying that out loud, so there you go, get ready. So first up, we have Abadesi Osunsade, who is founder of Hustle Crew. So Abadesi, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, everyone. Really happy to be here. In addition to Hustle Crew, I'm also VP of Global Community and Belonging at Brandwatch. We are hiring. And one half of the podcast Techish.
Thank you very much, Abadesi, joining us. For anyone that isn't already subscribed, I think that could be one thing that you take away from today. Listen to Techish. There's a big back catalogue actually to catch up on, so that'll take you a while. Next, we have Anissa Osman Britton, who is founder of 23 Code Street. So Anissa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. As well as being the founder of 23 Code Street, which is a coding school for women and non-binary people. We also do training in India with the funds from here. I'm also the CTO of a secondhand fashion brand called Vino Kilo.
Fantastic. So we've got a lot of multi-hyphenate, I think they call them, people, portfolio careers. We're very modern women of colour in tech. So that was Anissa. Our third panellist is Charlene Hunter, and Charlene is founder of Coding Black Females. So do you want to let us know a little bit more about you, Charlene?
Hey, thank you for having me. So I'm the founder and CEO of Coding Black Females, which is an organisation to get more Black women into the tech industry, but also progress Black women's careers as well in the industry and support that. Aside from that, what I also am is a lead engineer and academy lead at an organisation called Made Tech. We are also hiring if you're interested, but absolutely love my career. Thank you.
Good plug there, Charlene. Very good plug. After Charlene, we've got Nike Folayan, Dr. Nike Folayan, who's chair of AFBE, which is the Association for Black Engineers in the UK. So Nike, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikkei. I am an engineer by background. I work for a company called WSP, but I'm very passionate about getting ethnic minority people into our profession because it's really lacking in that diversity at the moment.
Thank you very much, Nikkei. And last but not least, we have Tolulope Ogunremi, who is joining us from Coders of Colour, and she's the founder of that organisation. So Tolulope, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So hi everyone, thanks for having me too. My name is Tolulope, as Anne-Marie mentioned, and I'm the founder of Coders of Colour, which is a not-for-profit to get young, underrepresented people of colour into tech through free workshops and programs. Aside from that, I'm just going to say I'm really passionate about education and sufficient education for all. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So you can see why we've got this panel together. Tolulope said she's passionate about education, and hopefully that's what we'll be doing for you up until 5 minutes to the hour. So I'm going to start with a question. Of course, we're all in Swapcard, so you should be able to, I think it's down there, pop your questions or your comments in, and I will be keeping an eye on them and feeding them into the panel. As I said, we would like this to be as interactive as possible. But I'm the host, so I can kick off with my first question, which is the title of this session is White Women as Allies. I'm hoping at least that all of us know what it means to be an ally and what allyship should look like. But does anyone want to kind of come in with an opening gambit for our definition? What is allyship? Maybe Abadesi.
I really like the definition of allyship that says it is using your privilege to advocate for teammates in your work culture who don't have the same privileges as you.
Thank you. Is there anyone that wants to embellish that definition? Have we got it sorted for all of us?
I guess something that I really liked, I heard somebody's definition about being an ally, and that was to do with the war. So when people were fighting the war, the allies were fighting with them. They were there with them. They weren't sort of at the sidelines. So that's how I see it, as somebody who's in your corner and fighting the fight with you.
Awesome, I love that. Is there anything to add? I love that image actually of kind of allies working alongside each other and fighting a war. I think sometimes it does feel like that's what we're doing at the moment. Anyone want to add anything to that definition? Maybe a third view on it? 3 heads are better than 2.
I think, yeah, just to add to those are fantastic. Just to add to it, I'd say an ally is someone that speaks up for you when you're not in the room. So in those conversations that you're not involved in, someone that stands in for you and defends your situation or your case.
Awesome. And I think there's also that element of sponsorship that we see in that as well, right? The kind of sponsorship is definitely a part of what allyship is and should be. Now, when we talk about kind of anti-racist behavior, which is something we've been talking about kind of quite a lot actually since the kind of events that I mentioned earlier on. I know there's definitely been this idea of trying to understand kind of what does it mean to then be an anti-racist? What does it mean to be an ally for people of colour? I know for some people, kind of trying to conceptualise what it is to be that ally is something that's difficult, I guess, to know. You know, Nikkei just mentioned a little bit of sponsorship, but what else is it? What are the behaviours? How do you know someone is an ally? That was the definition, but what does that mean in action? Anissa.
If I may talk from a personal experience, I think it's very interesting. I'm a brown woman in tech. I am part Indian and I am part English, and I've always considered myself a woman of color until very recently realizing that we had to uncouple that definition, because that the structures and the absolute differentiation that Black women experience compared to what I experience in tech are 2 complete worlds, and putting them under the same bracket just doesn't work. And as a woman of color, I have certain challenges, but I also have privilege. It is expected of me, being Indian, to be in tech. It is expected of me to be intelligent. It is expected of me to earn money. And I have had to go through a process of learning, where does my privilege start and end, and how can I use that to support the people around me? But more importantly, in my organization, are we doing enough by saying we're supporting women of color? And the answer is no. So a first step is working out where you stand and who are the people you're fighting alongside.
I think this is great, and I know that concept of privilege is definitely something that people have had to kind of face up again and understand their privileges, and also understand the role that stereotypes has to play in, you know, not only our own privileges but how we interact with others. I don't know for the rest of you as well, if there's more that you've more discussions that you've had with others about their privilege and how that's something that they can use in their allyship. Nico.
I think one thing I've found very difficult at times is when you're trying to have a conversation about your own very personal experiences, and straight up, and you know, this comes up, yeah, you know, we women, sort of thing, and I'm like, no, actually, my experiences are quite unique to who I am. I'm not saying that, you know, we can't talk about gender and the challenges with that, but sometimes it's just nice to feel that someone's listening to you for your experience and not trying to do a comparison with their experience as a woman. It just makes it really hard sometimes.
We're not going for that kind of oppression Olympics. I guess the other term that comes up quite a lot to try and explain this concept you're just talking about, kind of not all women, is the notion of intersectionality. So if we go to another kind of definition to at the beginning of the conversation, for anyone that is listening in and has never heard that term before, does anyone want to maybe explain what intersectionality is?
I'd be happy to talk a bit about that. So Kimberlé Crenshaw coined this phrase in 1984 in a research paper, and she's still alive today talking about it. And I highly recommend you watch her talk about it in her TED Talk online, and read articles about her. But at the time, she was doing research around the US legal system, and she was looking at what existing research said about how women in America go through the legal system, you know, what it's like to be on trial, what it's like to go to prison. And she realized that these reflections on the experiences of women were actually really inadequate, because often they only reflected the experiences of white women, and even in that context, privileged white women. And she said, we need to have discourse about all of the different types of women that are moving through society, whether that's women of different classes, of different races, of different sexual orientations, of different disability statuses. And that's where this idea of intersectionality comes from. So when we say things like all women at work, we're kind of ignoring decades of research that is showing us that's really unhelpful language, and also like really unproductive. Because if we're coming into work trying to create a more equitable culture, a culture that acknowledges our different lived experiences and the different privileges therein, then it's not helpful for us to group everyone based on whatever existing labels have suited us so far. Like, we have to look through that lens of intersectionality and actually understand that your different lived experiences means you have different needs, and that's how you create equity, by understanding what those different needs are and accommodating for them.
And so thank you very much, Abadesi, for that. And I think it's always interesting to kind of look at it alongside things like protected characteristics, which, you know, if we look at the Equalities Acts that we've got kind of across different countries, of course, that's defined in different ways. But here in the UK, we do have those 9 protected characteristics. So you can describe yourself as young, as Black, as female, you know, as straight and all the rest of it. But, you know, there's also beyond that, right? Like when we're talking about class or any of the other characteristics that someone might have, it ends up kind of layering on top of someone. So they're not just that one thing. I think it's funny. I used to say it was in a different order. So kind of if you meet me on different days, I'd put those adjectives in different orders, whereas actually it's, no, I'm all of those things at the same time, and they all have contributed to the experiences that I've had. Tolulope, for you running Coders of Colour, how have you been able to kind of broach this idea of intersectionality and have an intersectional approach in what you do, even though you're still focusing on Black females?
Well, I was speaking on intersectionality. I was going to draw on my own personal experiences and talk about how I went to student hackathons a lot when I was a student, and I wasn't treated the same way other girls were treated. And I think everything Abadesi said kind of encompasses the experiences that I had. And so I take my personal experiences into account and kind of ensure that the events that we run and the things that we do work for everyone. I think, speaking of protected characteristics and all the different layers, we kind of restrict to one of the characteristics. And I think even just saying, you know, people look like you, because we do events for both girls and boys, just having people that look like them, having developers that come in that look like them, makes them relaxed enough to feel that way. And we also are like 60 to 70% female in our events, which is great. So girl power all the way, I guess.
Having people that look like you. So Anita's asked the question for Abadesi. What was the name of the person you were quoting for the TED Talk?
Oh, it's Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly with a double E at the end.
Thank you very much. There you go, Anita. Kimberly Crenshaw. Brilliant. So Tolu Lope there was talking about kind of people that look like them. I guess for you, Charlene, you know, what has intersectionality again meant for coding Black females? How's that been something that you've worked into your process or the way that you set up the organization?
I think the interesting thing with intersectionality, especially with coding Black females, is when I was first starting out, a lot of people didn't really understand why we needed something that was Black women focused rather than just women, because it's clear that we, that we don't have enough women in technology, but we also don't have enough Black women, and we actually experience different things. So when we first started out, it was very much about conversations about our experiences, because we couldn't have those conversations at work. I personally recall having conversations, you know, about racism and experience with women at work, white women, and they didn't understand until they experienced sexism what it could be like to have an experience that was negative. So I think that that's one of the key things, is making sure that people have a space that they can communicate, see that familiarity with other people, and that really does aid that development. It aids learning, because you then feel comfortable to enter new spaces and to do additional things, like go to conferences that you may not have done before. So for me, it's about having that space where you can communicate, but then, you know, go back into the rest of the world and still be okay there, because you've got somewhere where you can have those conversations about what's really going on, what's really happening.
And I think, so with Nikkei, it's the same thing with the Association for Black Engineers. I know this is slightly to the side of tech, but I think it's definitely been something that's been leveled against the kind of feminist movement for a while, at least this fourth wave, if not the ones before, that it's been a lot of kind of white feminism and centering, like we've heard already on the white experience, without understanding that, you know, women are a multitude of colours and creeds. And so for you, what are your personal experiences, I guess, of not being accepted into those mainstream that have then led to you having an organisation like AFBE?
There's just, thank you, Anne-Marie. There's just so many experiences that sometimes I really remember I used to have a book. I used to call it my Black book, where every weekend I'd go home and I'd write about my really horrible experiences at work and have a little cry. And it was interesting at the time, because my brother at the time was having a lot of challenges at work as a Black man as well. And that's what sort of led to us talking about the issues around being Black in the workplace. And of course, at the time, the PM then said Black culture was responsible for crime in the UK. And, you know, it just all came together. And that's why we set up the organisation. And really, the ambition for us was to show that we are more than just people that, you know, work in particular sectors in arts and sports. We also do science, we also do tech, we also do engineering, and we're good at it. And so my experience, even with the Black Lives Matter thing, I've had very interesting emails where I've had to kind of question when you feel that you started to be accepted for who you are, and then someone challenges that with, oh, you know, you have you want to feel special, but what about people with red hair? Then you start to question an understanding of your experiences and whether people are actually listening to what's going on and why there's a need to represent Black people in a positive light.
And I think having it, you know, to the point of having a Black book, I mean, maybe there's a book deal in that Black book just so people can kind of see and understand. Although, you know, we'd definitely be talking about these experiences and these incidents for a long time. So I think it's definitely something for people to listen to and take the time to listen and understand before jumping to the whataboutery, I think, that we often have in these kind of conversations. And there's a question that's come in here from, I think, Anita. What do the panel think about employee networks and how effective they are? So for each of you, or is there anyone that wants to jump in on this, employee networks specifically for Black folks or people of colour, what are our thoughts on that? What have our experiences been with those at bigger organisations?
I think as a first step, it's always been a place or a safe space to voice these concerns, but it's not enough anymore just to give people that space. it was initially driven by people, right? It started with unionizations, and now we have people within communities getting that space together for people to have the conversations to say, hey, is it just me? Are these microaggressions real? Am I being gaslit? And what we need from there is people to go into the organization and say, hey, there's a reason we've had to create a safe space, put some money behind it, get some of these people to the top of the company, so we don't actually need to have these rooms and have these conversations in private. And I guess that's kind of where I see it at the moment.
Anyone else want to add to that or chime in with their experience with employee networks? So it's always a good first step. There's lots of organizations I've spoken to who have only just started their specialist employee networks kind of in the last couple of months, which has been a really interesting one to think, you know, where was that safe space before, right? But yeah, anyone want to add about these employee networks?
Yeah, I was actually just going to build on what you just made the point of. It's very strange to think of large organizations, I'm talking like hundreds of people, if not thousands, that still don't have any type of employee resource group or any type of internal community for underrepresented identities. It's kind of baffling, especially because we are seeing more and more research that shows a positive correlation between performance and psychological safety. So while it absolutely isn't the only thing you can do to create a more equitable work culture, it has to be at least one of the things you do. And I think if you haven't done that yet, it might say a lot about how empowered, or rather the opposite there, that people from those backgrounds feel in your community. So I think that is like really important. And I think the second thing is, if you are going to do it, make sure that any ideas that are surfaced from that group are really seen and heard and actioned on, because I think what happens is a lot of these groups are created, but then they're not given any actual power or influence to create lasting change or create impact. And then that can actually be really demotivating. I started a Twitter thread recently and I said, hey, Black Tech Twitter, what do you look for in potential employers? And the majority of folks said that they do look to see if there are employee resource groups within that company focused on the Black experience, but also whether that group has power to drive change and can actually launch initiatives like measuring diversity and inclusion, investing in Black-owned businesses if we work with suppliers, or investing funds into the communities around the company. So yeah, I think it's really important to like, one, do it, and then two, like take it seriously.
I think that's great. And there's kind of a couple of comments that are coming in as well. So Ronnie, it totally agrees with you. I think employee networks are a good starting point, but organizations should put their money where their mouth is. It's beginning to feel like a box ticking exercise. So we've got that in twice. I think the other thing that comes from this, so there's a great question here from Devin. So Devin said, Devin's a woman of color. I've often, I can't tell from the picture, I've often struggled at work where I've been asked, what can we, i.e. the company, do about the lack of Black people / women here? And she says it's a lot of pressure and I certainly don't have all the answers. So do you have any thoughts on how to respond in these situations?
So I would say for that, what I found has actually worked really well is, and this isn't a plug, it's more understanding that you need to work with the community, is working with companies like Coding Black Females, with all the others that are doing amazing stuff. Because what that does is you've then got a direct connection to the community, and that's a lot of people who are looking for roles, they're looking for jobs. And I think what people tend to do is they don't realize that can really help to find talent. There's a lot of talent out there, there's so much, and that way you can really directly tap into it. And if you are struggling to find it, I always say create it. Let's generate that talent, let's create additional programs so that we can train people into those positions if we can't find the people, because it's hard to recruit for leadership positions anyway, like anyway across the board. So if that's talent's not there, then let's generate the talent, let's work with people to make sure that we can get more people into the right positions in organizations.
I think definitely let's create the talent. I think the other discussion to be had though is also around kind of, it's not just that there's a dearth of talent. There are a lot of talented people. They just don't look like what talent has always looked like. So I know this is definitely something that comes up, and I don't know, for each of you, maybe Tolulope, you can kind of come in on this end of, what are the kind of tough conversations, or what do folks that want to ally and want to bring in that talent, what do they need to be doing now to make sure that they're hiring the right kinds of people?
I think I've had a few conversations about this with with organizations in the last couple of weeks, but it's basically what Charlene said. If you honestly have looked around and met Coding Black females and met, you know, everyone here, and still not found the talent you're looking for, maybe look within and see if you can invest in the future and create programs and partner up with these organizations who have a pool of people who want to learn. But I've spoken to some about how they've restructured their kind of referral scheme and how referrals kind of create this group of homogenous people working, and you know, some of them donate to certain organizations with the referral, or kind of work with certain organizations to diversify that pool and not incentivize homogeneity within organizations.
I love that. There's a great question here from Mandy as well about what do I do to encourage the women of colour to join my organisation, but then to also give them the confidence that they'll have a good experience. So I don't know if there's anyone else in the panel that wants to comment on the hiring, but also the kind of what happens after the hiring.
I think it's really important to first ask why they aren't already working there. And you can understand that by talking to women in your team, like not even just women of color, but just like any women. Like, what do you like about working at this company? And what are the things that frustrate you and annoy you? And like what you often find is that there maybe hasn't been enough of a commitment to fostering equity and equality in the organization. There could be established norms in your work culture that favor the dominant groups, i.e. men, i.e. white men, and actually don't favor people from less represented backgrounds. So I think the first thing to do is make sure your house is in order, because ain't nobody want to come hang out with you if it ain't. So, you know, it's really important to do that. And then like, once you have a compelling narrative about why someone like me should come work with you, then I'd be interested in hearing about that. And that's when you can start partnering with all of the groups represented in this panel to start thinking about how you can actually like show that you're committed to attracting diverse talent, whether that's, you know, Hustle Crew, YSYS, you know, there are so many communities, even STEMettes, that are doing the work of diversifying the pipeline. So like, what's your long-term commitment to supporting that diverse pipeline, and how are you demonstrating that? Because then people will come to you. You know, I keep tabs on which employers are doing the work because they're interesting to me. And I'm also keeping tabs on who's silent, you know, who's not doing the work, who's not speaking up, and they're not interesting to me. They're not people I want to work with.
Absolutely. Nikkei, you were going to come in on this as well.
I think Abdesi said everything I wanted to say. It's just kind of look in your closet first before you come out and say you want to do stuff. Look inside, what's happening to the ones that you have? How do they feel before you come out and say, well, I want to recruit more women? It's just simple as that.
I think it's definitely important. It's not just about looking diverse, right? Or looking like you've got the right kind of people. It's, you know, if you've genuinely got that going on internally, if you're kind of prepared the ground and you're ready for those people to flourish, then it will be much easier to be able to recruit them and bring them in. There's a great comment here from Joe. How much do you feel the inability, in quotes, to find talent is about not seeing the talent that meets your hiring criteria, and how much is about not recognizing the talent as the criteria is biased? And I think with this, it's always, you know, if you ask what you've always asked, you'll get what you'll always get. And I think people do need to be willing to make those changes around the hiring and have those tough discussions. So before we talk about change, a little bit more about changes in hiring, I wanted us to talk a little bit about tough discussions. And I think this is something that definitely, if we want to make change, if we want to move things forward, we do need to have these tough discussions. We do really need to have these difficult discussions, and we all need to be kind of ready and prepped for having them and for kind of having them out, right? I think it's definitely a tough subject to broach. It's definitely sensitive. It's also breaking the habit of a lifetime, if not the way the system is set up. So is there any advice any of you would give for having tough conversations, having challenging conversations, and also what, you know, this discomfort is important. And Abdesi and I have spoken about this on panels before, but, you know, what are our tips? What are our advice for people to kind of go outside of their comfort zone and allow the magic to happen, I guess, in terms of being that ally and having different people of colour come into organisations? Is there any tips that people want to suggest for our allies that are listening in?
Can I start with adding a side note to the previous point? Is that okay?
Go for it, Nisa, you can do what you want.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. It's so nice when you let me do what I
give
want.
You permission.
It doesn't happen very often. I think one of the things this year was saying it's not enough. And maybe as a company, we've been in a privileged position to say no to money for the first time ever. But people come to us and they want to work with us because they then put on their website, we, for our D&I staff, work with 23 Code Street. And at the beginning of the year, just before lockdown happened, we had a look at how many of the partners who worked with us as trainers or ran workshops then hired those people that we were training. The number was below 30%. That's not good enough. Like, it's actually not good enough to put your money into this training as a D&I work, but not then hire those people. So we looked further, and I don't want to go into all the numbers, but we then started to say, no, if you work with us, you have to hire at least 3 people from the training program. That is your commitment, and you have to sign a contract. On our programs, we train a minimum of 12 people, right? So 3 is quite a big number. That's a quarter. That's a quarter. I had to do some quick maths there. And that was a really hard conversation to have with those brands. I mean, we've gone quite quiet on social over the last few months because we're doing lots of B2B stuff. But having to have those conversations with people who are really senior, like CMOs, head of D&Is at big corporates, is really scary. But you can have those conversations when you know you're not just fighting for yourself. Like, there's a whole bunch, a generation actually, that you can impact just by saying, you've got to hire 3 more people from here. And then you're actually putting your money where your mouth is. And that's what the conversations I want us to have. If you have the privilege to say no to money, if you have the privilege to get someone else into a room, if you have the privilege to get out of that room and let someone else take the mic for a second, use those moments, because you have no idea the impact that you can have on the tech scene, on your company, and again, like a whole generation that's about to come up.
Definitely looping back here to kind of using your privilege and leaning into that privilege. I think that kind of conversation is tough, as you said, but it also depends on what you have to lose. And I think often as a white woman in a lot of these environments, you have a lot less to lose by standing up for your allies and kind of putting your neck on the line than maybe Black women would in the same position.
You probably have more to gain. Like,
let's say the positive spin. Yeah, you're right.
Like, there's so much to gain. Having all of us in a room, you're going to have so much fun. Like, you're going to have such a range of talent that comes into your room. We're going to take workload off of you, but we're going to give so many new ideas that you have no idea why that wasn't thought of before. You can't build for everyone if you don't have everyone in the room, right? Like, start thinking about what this brings for you, not just what you're giving up, because you're not giving up that much.
Charlene, is there anything you want to add about kind of having these tough conversations?
I would sort of say just have them. I've had a lot of people ask me, how do I get started on these conversations? What do I do? What do I say? And I'm like, well, just start having the conversation and see what happens. I've had a lot of questions come my way in the last few months, which has been, I would say, frustrating. And I think half of that would be, I understand people asking me those questions to a point, but I do think that people should go away and have those conversations with each other. And then if they hear someone say something that's not okay, because somebody will always be able to tell if something isn't okay in a room, then don't be silent. Don't sit there and listen to it being said and not have any response to it. So I think it's really about starting the conversation, even if it is difficult, and then continuing it and developing that thought process and seeing where you actually end up and validate that what you've said actually makes sense.
I think definitely it's being that active bystander, which I think we've definitely seen before from kind of learning from other places, kind of how to get involved if there's something happening on the bus, for example. But I think it's definitely if you see it, if you say it, see it. If you see it, say it. I think it's definitely kind of a good way, and getting and building that habit almost becomes the other thing of, the first time you do it, it might be tough, but the 10th time you're doing it, it's actually just part of the way that you can communicate with others and part of the way that you are at work. So there's a couple more questions that are coming in, and we've only got 10 minutes. So I wanted to broach one more topic, which I mentioned earlier. So we talked about the kind of having the tough conversations. I think the other thing is kind of how do we make those changes? What are we suggesting for allies to do, while they're in the process of hiring and building their teams correctly? So how do you bring in the views of Black women? How do you ensure that you as an organization are ready for them before they come, before they arrive, before they manage to make it through your hiring process? How do we have sub in Black women's perspectives into what we're doing? Tolulope, do you want to kick us off on this question?
Oh, okay. So I've actually had a company reach out and say that they're not very happy with what they look like, and they'd appreciate my perspective. So just reaching out to, I guess, Black women that they know, or people who are connected to groups like Coding Black Females, for example. There are loads there, right? And reach out to them. And the same thing
pay them for their consultant time, their consulting.
Oh yes, so pay them for their time and their lived experience, which you know never really level out or break even with, and listen to their experiences, or run things by them. You know, there are some posts on social media that look a bit wayward, and you just had to show a Black woman and it would have been fine. So just things like that. Pay women for their time if you really can't see anyone near you. And there are several women on this panel right now that you can, so there's no excuse to not being able to find anyone.
Brilliant. This is your starting list. Anyone else want to come in on this? How do we sub in the perspective?
So mine's pretty similar to what you've just said as well. And what that would be is, sometimes what I've seen happen a lot lately is there is one Black woman in an organisation and their time is being used to have those conversations, but they're not given time for it. So they still have to get their entire job done, plus relive every single experience they've had whilst being a consultant to make sure that your the initiatives that you're putting together or the views that you're putting out there are correct. And I think that if you're going to do that and people are okay with it, that's fine, but allocate time. And if they're not okay with it, you know, ask them first, is this something that we can do? Is that okay? And maybe they'll say get consultants in and pay for that time. But I would just say that make sure that you do put money behind it and allocate the time, rather than just assume that you can just tap into someone and make them relive everything whilst also consulting for you.
Pick their brains for the price of a coffee. Yeah, you can't even buy me the coffee now because we're not sitting opposite each other. So don't slide into my inbox to pick my brains. Right. So we're almost done, unfortunately, with our time. Thank you very much to everyone for the questions and the comments that you've been popping in. I'm going to close with a question here that I kind of asked each of the panelists in advance to kind of set homework, I guess, for everyone that's tuning in. So this is kind of, you're an ally, you know, what are some of the things that you can do? Someone did ask earlier, what are top 3? We're going to go twice better than that. We're going to do twice as better as typical Black women do, and we're going to give you 6 things that you should be doing to ensure that you're kind of doing your homework and pledge. So I'm going to copy and paste these into the chat so you can kind of take them away. But I think it'd be great for you to see kind of how many of these you're able to do in the next month, and then the month after, and the month after that, until these are 6 habits. And then maybe in a year's time, Georgina can bring us back and we can give you your new homework for the following year. So again, running in alphabetical order. Abadesi, what's your one thing that you'd like to put forward as your, we'll call it an Abadesi pledge for the white women as allies that are listening in to make sure that they do?
Thank you. Brene Brown says it's a privilege to be comfortable when it comes to talking about equality, talking about inclusion. So my challenge is to have one uncomfortable conversation a week with another white woman about racism and all the isms. So enjoy.
Thank you very much. So that's homework 1. Anissa, homework 2.
Review.
Oh, is Anissa gone for anyone else? Oh, she has. Gosh, how funny is that? Oh, start again. You've just come back.
Oh no! What?
Set the homework again. Otherwise,
set the homework again. Okay, sorry. Review your hiring processes and try and remove as much bias as possible. That's everything from the language we use, so no coding ninjas in there, to where you post those jobs. So look at something like Be Applied that anonymizes where people went to school and where they're from and the color of their skin and so on, and see how that changes who you get into the door.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Anissa. The audience are loving this homework. So let's keep them coming. Charlene, you're next. What's your Charlene pledge? What would you like to see folks doing?
Yeah, mine is, if you see opportunities for promotion or leadership opportunities that you think that Black women would be great for, put them forward. Don't remain silent if nobody else is speaking for them.
Thank you very much, Charlene. There we go. Don't remain silent. No more of this inactive bystander. Let's become active bystanders. Nike.
I'm going to do 2 for 1, sorry. First one being, don't assume, don't make assumptions, just listen a bit more. One of the things that AFB did as part of Black Lives Matter to respond to it was produce what we call an Access A plan, and it's available online. And it's about A for, every company has to really accept racial parity, the issues around it, and educate yourself, have a strategy. So create a strategy, and most importantly, be accountable. And all these things you can do on a personal level and as part of an organization, a bigger organization.
Thank you. 2 pieces of homework there from Dr. Nike. Tolulope, what is your piece of homework?
Mine is quite a big one, and is that if you can't see anyone around you, or the hiring is not as you expect, then partner with organizations to build training programs to get the next generation of Black women or any women of color into tech.
Thank you very much. And then my one, I'm going to add one in because I hosted the panel. So mine is that no one who hasn't had the necessary training, the right kind of training, should have any hiring responsibilities in your organization. And if you are someone that has the power to make this happen, then do go ahead and do that. If people haven't got the right the absolute minimum everyone should have is unconscious bias training, but I think we need that equitable, that belonging, that diversity training that you can get, whether it's from Hustle Crew, whether it's with YSYS. Make sure you've got the right people making your hiring decisions, because otherwise this is going to be impossible, and we've all just wasted the last however many minutes of your life telling you things. So that is it. That is everyone's homework. My final plug in our last minute that we've got is, we all run these organizations. You can see all of our bios here below the feed. So do get in touch, do partner, whether it's with actual cash, because, we all have bills to pay, families to feed. And when you fund a woman of color, there's a lot of knock-on effects that are happening in her local economy when you do that, or whether it's volunteering or just raising awareness of what we're doing, what we're up to, and talking about us is also super important. A couple of us have books as well, so go search them out, find the books, buy them. Abadesi's got Dream Big, Hustle Hard. I've got a couple as well. Everyone's got them. So I think get in touch, get following, and get those continuous reminders to help you be that ally, and join up to the memberships as well. There's quite a lot of things that you can do, but go do the research, go do the time. Find a good one to invest in, get investing, get donating, and get involved. So that is it. I want to say a big thank you to my fantastic panelists who have joined me today, to Abadesi, Osman Sadeh of Hustle Crew, to Anissa Osman Britton of 23 Code Street, to Charlene Hunter of Coding Black Females, to Dr. Nike Folayan of Association for Black Engineers, to Tolulope Ogunremi of Coders for Color. And I'm going to say thank you to myself, because why not? Thanks, Anne-Marie, for hosting and doing such a good job. See you all soon, and enjoy the rest of the festival.